Alright, Institutions of National Government Unit 4, Video 18, the ever-exciting policy-making and the bureaucracy. Alright, so here is the basic story. On your notes page that you guys have, you see that there are 6 steps that are taking place here. So we're going to go through each step, and then within those steps, there's certain terms that need to be defined. Alright, so our first step is that Congress passes laws. We know that. We know about the lawmaking process. However, Congress lacks the time, expertise, and ability to be involved in every detail of every program. So they pass something like the Clean Air Act, and the goal of that, oddly enough, with the name, it is, go figure, to make sure that we have clean air, clean water. However, they're going to leave it to somebody else to actually handle the running of this program. Before we get to that, let's talk about how that law got made in the first place. We have 2 terms here. Iron triangles is this one, and then we'll do issue networks next. They're similar in a couple of ways. Iron triangles are made up of 3 things: committees, interest groups, and bureaucratic agencies. I think a good way to remember that is acronym CIA, committee, interest group, agency. So these are the 3 parts of an iron triangle. What they are is they are long-lasting, stable relationships that are designed to influence public policy. And this chart is a really good breakdown of that. So the idea here is that interest groups representing the people, they are able to influence the congressional committees as they are making the law, and they are also able to influence the bureaucratic agencies who actually implement the law. So the whole purpose of this is that there's influence not only when the law has already been made, but influencing the law itself before it gets made, on all 3 parts of this. The trend regarding iron triangles is that they're becoming less important. That's what that down arrow there is symbolizing. On the other hand, we have issue networks, which have the same purpose, influencing public policy. However, whereas iron triangles are permanent, long-lasting relationships, issue networks are loose, informal, and temporary. They're made up of committees, interest groups, and agencies, just like an iron triangle. However, they also include lawyers and academics. So the main idea here is that when there is a specific topic that needs to be discussed, that's when an issue network would form. When they have figured out their purpose and achieved it, they move on, and that issue network then dissolves, disappears. It is not a long-lasting relationship like the iron triangle is. This issue networks are increasing in influence. Alright, Congress leaves policy implementation to bureaucratic agencies. Remember, this is as a result of number 1. Number 1 said Congress passes laws but lacks the time, expertise, and ability to be involved in every detail of every program. So, Congress leaves the policy implementation to bureaucratic agencies. Implementation means putting a policy into operation. So, Congress passes the Clean Air Act, and then they allow the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, a bureaucratic agency, they are then allowed to implement that policy. And as you can see, that table on the right, or that graphic on the right, the EPA, it says, has a new Clean Air Interstate rule, which we'll come back to in a few minutes, so they get to make rules. As part of that, they have administrative discretion. This is when Congress sets broad policy guidelines, and bureaucratic agencies are given administrative discretion. That means that they can choose how to implement policies. So the government, Congress passes a law saying we need clean air. That's good. Now it is up to EPA, the bureaucratic agency. They can decide, all right, what is the best way for us to actually achieve that goal? What should we do to make sure that we have clean air? So they have discretion, they have the ability to choose how to actually carry out that law. As part of that, they are allowed to make laws. And when bureaucratic agencies make laws, it is called administrative law. They are regulations made by agencies, and they do have the power of law. So, I'm just going to go back real quick. The EPA made a new Clean Air Interstate rule about coal-fired power plants, etc. It has to be passed, or it has to be followed, I should say. It is the same as if Congress had made that law. So you cannot be like, oh, that was a law from the EPA. The EPA, they're not Congress. I don't have to follow it. If you tried that, you will lose. So administrative law, it's when bureaucratic agencies make a law. So once that Clean Air Act is passed, the EPA is then allowed to choose how to implement clean air standards. So let's say, for instance, they make a law, administrative law, saying that, for instance, any plant or factory, let's say factory, that they're only allowed so much pollution per day or per hour. And they make that law. That is administrative law, and people have to follow that, the same as if Congress had made that law. If they don't, then you have the step 5. Bureaucratic agencies have the power to to enforce administrative law and punish violators. So not only do they get to make the rules, they also get to punish you if you don't follow them. So they will come, the EPA will check up on you in your factory, and they will ensure that you are disposing of your waste properly, or that you are not polluting too much, or whatever the law is specifically. And then if you are punishing, or if you are violating, I should say, they will punish you. Administrative adjudication, that word you can kind of see in adjudication is judicial, or adjudicate, which means to hear a case. Administrative adjudication is when an agency, bureaucratic agency, settles a dispute, so somebody breaking that law, in the same manner as a court would. So this picture on the right, that is of administrative adjudication. It looks pretty similar to how a trial would look in a courthouse. Instead of it being the judicial branch, though, the EPA or whatever bureaucratic agency, they have the power to hear that case themselves, and then they will punish the violator, and they'll decide, all right, you're subject to this fine. And then when they appeal, they have to go to the EPA, not to court. They go to the EPA, and the EPA will hear the case and decide whether or not to punish that person or group or company. Those powers are sometimes referred to as quasi-legislative and quasi-judicial, meaning like legislative or like judicial, because while they are part of the executive agency, don't forget, bureaucratic agencies, they are part of the executive branch. They are able to make their own rules or laws, and they are then able to punish people who violate those laws. So this is sometimes criticized as violating the separation of powers, because it is like they're acting like the legislative branch, and it is like they're acting as if they're the judicial branch. So that is, remember, this is a criticism. This has not been ruled unconstitutional, so this absolutely happens. It is allowed to happen. It continues to happen today. This is merely a criticism of what some people say that don't like this power that bureaucratic agencies have. 3 other criticisms of the bureaucracy. One is that it is too large, 2.7 million people working for it in this country. It is too difficult to fire bad workers. There's often a lot of appeals and steps like that have to take place first, and that it makes it more difficult or more expensive to get things done. And that bottom picture, red tape, is sometimes a word used to describe bureaucracy. So if you want to put in a swimming pool in your backyard, a lot of times you cannot just do that. You need to get proper permits and things like that. That's an example of bureaucracy. So it makes it more difficult, more expensive for you to get your pool done, because you need to go through all these steps. It's going to take time, and you also have to pay for all of those various permits and licenses.